welcome. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes. Great, great. Thank you. If you guys don't mind turning on your cameras, that would be awesome. So I can see your lovely faces. Great. Thank you. I can see how you're reacting to this class, whether you love it, hate it. Maybe I can't tell all that, but I can tell a little bit. That's helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Abigail, thanks for the poll. I didn't even think about that. What do you guys think of the review inbox? The goal behind it is to encourage you to get to inbox 0 by reviewing the questions that you haven't reviewed yet. Of course, if you review a question and don't remove it from the inbox, then your inbox is just going to get stacked up with an overwhelming number of questions that you quote need to review, but you actually don't because you already reviewed them. So just curious, anyone have anything to say about any of that? Silence.
There was a comment in the public chat. I don't know if maybe you don't see it if you got here after.
Oh, okay. Wait, I think I see it. Okay. Okay, good. I'm glad one of you likes it. Zara, yeah.
I was surprised that you guys put that feature because Nate's always like, stop saving questions, just do them now. But it's nice because well, I actually, like, ever since I started hearing him say that, I do just force myself to do them.
Yeah.
But it's nice because sometimes I want to go back to one where like I flag it.
Yep.
But I could use this instead. But yeah, I was surprised that you guys put it.
Yeah, the idea isn't to save up questions, but that can of course happen. I guess what I was thinking is when you do a timed section, right? You're going to have maybe, let's say, 7 or 8 questions that you probably should review because you got them wrong or whatever. Maybe you review 4 of them and then you got to go. Those other 4 are saved and you can do them one at a time. So it's not this overwhelming task ahead of you. Oh, I got to review the section. No, you just have to review one question. Once you do that, boom, that's one less thing in your inbox. Kind of like email, but sometimes you create something and then people use it in a very different way. So we'll see what happens. But if you have any other specific feedback, please give it. Thanks, Zara, for sharing that. Okay, well, anyways, my name is Ben Olson. I'm one of the co-founders here at LSAT Demon. Today is a free class, so there will, of course, be some of you live students who come all the time. And then some of you maybe who have never even interacted with the Demon before. Anyone, is this your first class ever? Live class, I guess? Okay, Brendan, great. Olivia, I hope it's a good one. The goal here today is to do a game and then go over it, talk about the setup and so forth. And then if we have time, do 3 logical reasoning questions. Will depend on how long we take to go over the game, but this game, I think, is pretty straightforward, so we should be able to get through it and then do LR. The best way to learn, in my opinion, is to try to do a question, maybe fail, or maybe don't do it as well as you could have, and then to review it and figure out what you did right and what you could have done better. Talking about a game in the abstract isn't as helpful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to do the game on the syllabus. If you don't see it on the syllabus, ask us in the chat because it's the first game in the syllabus. It's called Freedom. In any case, just go ahead and click on that and click Start Challenge and try to do the game as best you can. Just read and understand it as carefully as possible and then start answering the questions. If you don't finish, no big deal. I'll then start going over it question by question and take your questions and figure out how we can get better at the games. Cool. Any questions about any of that? Okay, good luck. You have 10 minutes.
Oh, Ben, there are a couple of people with hands raised. I don't know if they.
Oh, I didn't know if you guys had questions or you're just, okay, yeah, go for it. Brandy. Oh, Randy, do you have a question? Maybe not. Kim? Question? Kim, I am not hearing you. Okay.
I'll,
No question.
there she goes.
Oh, okay, no worries. Okay, good. All right. So anyways, we'll go ahead and post the link. Abigail just posted the link to the syllabus, and we can post the link. I'll post the link to the game right now, so you can go to it directly. Oh, Abigail beat me to it. Okay, great. So that's the game. Good luck.
Sorry, I have a question. Are we doing test J game 3?
Absolutely.
Because-
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank
Perfect.
you.
Yeah. All right, everybody, that was about 12 minutes. I see a bunch of us have filled out the poll, so thank you. Looks like most of us think this is a difficulty level 3 game, so that's right in the middle. Difficulty 5, of course, is the highest. Difficulty 1 is the easiest, which is also what this game seems to be tagged in our system. So maybe our system is right, or maybe it's training you to identify these as level 3 games. I have no idea, but let's go ahead and jump in. If you're not done, I'm sorry. The most important thing here is figuring out how to set up these games anyways. So as long as you read through the rules and gave a crack at that, I think we're good to get started. Let me turn on one thing here really quick. Not that. There we go. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so this is test J game 3. I've written down some of the rules already. Can you all see that? You're good? Okay. So we have this 7-week long voyage, right? So I have my 7 slots here, which represent the 7 weeks. Each voyage will occur in exactly one of the first 7 weeks of the season, okay? Each voyage will be to exactly one of 4 destinations. So we have our 4 destinations. Each destination will be scheduled for at least one of the weeks. Okay, that's a very, very common rule, right? To say that each of our variables is going to appear once in this game. I'm not as concerned about that rule, but what I do want you to be aware of is when that rule doesn't exist. Okay, it doesn't happen very often, which is the problem. So many games say something along the lines of, hey, each of our variables, each of our players, in this case, destinations, is going to happen exactly once, or at least once, or exactly twice, or something like that. And so you get so used to it that when the rule doesn't exist, you just assume it. But there are some games where you can have variables and none of the variables, at least one of the variables isn't used. You could have a situation where it's just not even used, yet you're assuming that it has to be put in there because they mentioned it. The only reason all 4 destinations have to be visited is because of this rule right here. Each destination will be scheduled for at least one of the weeks. Okay, now we have the remaining rules. You know, this is kind of a formatting glitch of the LSAT. We just read a bunch of rules, and now we're going to read a bunch more rules. There's no difference between these rules, but for some reason they like to give us these rules in a list and the other rules in a paragraph. There is no difference. So if you ever find yourself struggling with a question and you keep going back to the rules, well, you may need to go back to the paragraph because the paragraph has rules as well. In any case, J will not be its destination in week 4. So I'm crossing out J below week 4. T will be its destination in week 7. This next rule I didn't draw just because I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Freedom will make exactly 2 voyages to M. So that's kind of significant. At this point, I know that some of these variables have to go more than once because we only have 4 destinations, but we have 7 weeks, right? Now they're telling us a little bit more about that. This guy goes exactly twice. So we're going to see M twice and only twice. And at least one voyage to G will occur in some week between those 2 voyages. Okay, so what that essentially means is we're going to have M, G, M. Okay, those dashes just mean that there could be things that come in between M and G, right? Jad, you have a question?
I'm sorry, that was my cat.
Oh, okay. Your cat has a question. I'm ready. No, that's cool. Okay, so anyways, MGM could be next to each other, right? It could be a block of 3, but these dashes tell me, okay, not necessarily. Maybe M is stretched out to here, the other M is here, and G just comes somewhere in between. I have no idea. It's a whole range of possibilities. Ada.
Yeah, I have a question. So why do we, so is it a rule saying here that we have to fill all of the weeks? How do I know that I have to fill all of the weeks? Maybe
Yeah, you
there's
say,
no voice.
why not skip some weeks, right?
Exactly.
It's expensive. Well, it does say, this is the second sentence, I think. It says each voyage will occur in exactly one of the first 7 weeks.
That doesn't mean that all of the weeks have to have a voyage. I mean, I'm not a native speaker of English, and sometimes I'm having some.
Oh, yeah, even the first line, right? A cruise line is scheduling 7 week-long voyages. So if you're scheduling 7 voyages,
yeah, maybe. Oh, okay, 7. I mean, then you have to assume somehow.
yeah.
Assumption, but LSAT doesn't like assumptions. So I don't know.
No, they don't. They don't like all assumptions. Some assumptions are good, but yeah, generally speaking, the games are going to be pretty literal and contractual, and so yeah, we should find a sentence in there somewhere saying that. But if it's not, yeah, then you're right. It could be empty.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So we got the MGM. Those are our 2 M's, by the way. So I don't need to worry about M anymore. All right. So this is a small thing, but I do find it helpful. I'm going to cross this out. I don't need to worry about M anymore, right? I have M right here. I'm not going to cross out G and T, even though they're in my diagram, because I could have another G, I could have another T, right? So I'm not done with those folks, but I am done with M, okay? All righty, next rule. G will be its destination in the week preceding any voyage it makes to J. All right, this is a very commonly confused rule, but let's try to think about it intuitively for a second. G is going to be the destination, right? In the week before any voyage it makes to J. So anytime it goes to J, it's got to have G before it. The way I'm going to write this is, I'm going to write it like this. Anytime I have J, I have to have G before it. This arrow is sort of like an if-then statement. It's basically, if I have J, then I have to have G. Okay, this is not the same as drawing this, though. This would mean that G and J are this block, that they have to be together. No, you could have G by itself, but if you have J, then you have to have G. Does anyone have any questions about that? Because it's kind of a confusing rule.
Hey, Ben, I'm sorry. I don't know how to raise my hand on here, but yeah, for that rule over there, I just assumed that it was like one time. So anytime Jamaica, we see Jamaica, G has to come before Jamaica.
That's right. Anytime the J happens, G has to come before it. So if we have 2 J's, we know we're going to have at least 2 G's because it's got to come before each one of those.
And because it said any, right?
That's the key word. You got it exactly right.
Okay.
Anytime J happens, G happens. That's not the same, though, as saying anytime G happens, J happens. That's a different rule, right? So.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So I was reading too fast. Thank you.
That's common. But the key word here is any. Here's an example outside of this context. Anytime I get hit by a bus, I get angry. So what that means is if I get hit by a bus, I'm going to get mad. That does not mean, though, that anytime I get mad, I got hit by a bus. I could get mad for other reasons. Try not to. I try to avoid that. But sometimes, you just got to get mad and tell people what's going wrong. Anyways, okay. Last rule says no destination will be scheduled for consecutive weeks. Okay, so I'm using X as a generic variable here. Basically, nobody can go together twice, right? So I can't have T here. This rule is fine because M is never going to be next to each other. But anyways, just something to keep in mind in the background. All right. Couple things here. This rule happens enough in the games that I know to look for this, but I suspect maybe some of you saw it, maybe some of you didn't. But where can J not go if G has to come before J? Stephanie.
Can't go first.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Can't go first, right? If J goes first, then G would have to come before it, but there is no week before it because these are the first 7 weeks of the season, right? So little inference here, J can't go first. Sorry, this is getting a little crowded. I probably should make more room here. But also we know that T can't go 6. Are you guys cool with that? Okay. Okay. Camilla, you have a question.
Oh, I was just gonna say like, oh, sorry, let me turn my camera on. Sorry, guys, I'm at work. We got the little privacy thing on the, anyways. Yeah, no, I made that very silly mistake for number 11. As soon as they corrected me, I was like, oh, holy crap.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
put Jamaica first. And that's not possible. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, good. I'm glad you see it now. That's great. This will happen probably on other games that you do. Will that happen in the future? I don't know, but it's something to be aware of. Okay, cool. Now I saw that in the poll, 50% of you did worlds, 33% of you did not, and 17% of you said unsure. You're probably like, what the heck is worlds? Worlds is simply focusing in on a variable or a rule and saying, hey, how many places can this rule apply, or how many places can this variable go? And then creating one world for each of those places. So for example, in this game, this is a block, right? It's not our traditional block, but it still is a block in the sense that if you have J, then you have to have G, right? And so blocks tend to be a great place to create worlds because they take up 2 slots, right? So how many slots can J go in? Danielle.
I think J can go in 1, 2, and 4 slots.
Yeah, you're right. Which 4?
2, 3, 5, and 6.
2, 3, 5, and 6. Yeah, because the rule said, hey, J can't go in 4. We figured out J can't go in 1. Obviously, J can't go in 7 because T is already there. So there's only 4 places for J to go. And if we know where J goes, we also then immediately know where G goes, right? For those of you who created worlds, did you create 4 worlds on the basis of J or something else? I'm just, yeah, we don't really have a poll for that, but maybe in the chat you can say what you created worlds on the basis of. Okay, Hannah, yes, based on J, the J, and then ultimately the JG block. Okay, some of you, it looks like you created worlds on the basis of M. That's interesting. So M, right, let's see here, this MGM, if we start on this side, this M could go here, 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 or here. So you could create 4 worlds on the basis of the first M, or maybe 4 worlds on the basis of the last M. The point is you grab a variable and you put it into slots, the only slots it can go into, and then see what can happen, okay? All right, let's just take a look here. I'm going to go ahead and create, J stuck out to me because of the block. If it's all right, I'm gonna go ahead and do worlds on the basis of J. And so it looks like this, right? I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I'm going to use the top and bottom of these diagrams. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 worlds. Hey, you guys okay with that? In all these worlds, T is last. You guys okay with that? Raise your hand if you're like lost. But these are my 4 worlds. I'm going to put J in 2. J in 3. I can't put J in 4. I can put J in 5, and I can put J in 6. Okay, those are the only 4 possibilities for J, so I can create 4 worlds on the basis of J. Okay, Destiny.
I have a question. So I'd made worlds, but not on the basis of J because from reading the stimulus, I couldn't determine how many of J there were. So what clued you guys in to use J? Because I was thinking, well, J could go twice.
You're absolutely right. J could go twice. So unfortunately, I'm not going to get rid of J by doing this. All I'm going to do is I do know that J has to go at least once. So in every diagram that I create, I'm going to have J somewhere. And these are the only 4 places that J can go.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Now, because, Divya, am I saying that right?
Divya, sorry if there's like background noise. So when you're creating worlds, do you generally just choose like the most limited letter, or like if you have a block, is that what you base it off of?
Yeah, so blocks are great things to create worlds on the basis of. This is a chain. If it were a block of 3, like if MGM were smushed together, it would be great, right? Because it'd be 3 variables. But because they're loose, knowing that M goes here doesn't immediately tell me where G and M go. So it's not something that's super satisfying in terms of creating worlds. Certainly can. There's only 4 slots that the first M can go in. But yeah, it's just a little trickier because, okay, what do I do with the G? What do I do with the other M? Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool. Martha.
Hi. My difficulty is knowing when to create worlds, because sometimes I feel I've come to just my own rule, but of course I'm asking you because I will amend it to whatever you tell me. I feel like whenever I have opportunity to do more than 4 worlds, I just waste too much time. So I like to keep, in this case, I will keep it for worlds because it works. But did you recommend to doing more than 4 worlds if the problem allows for it?
Yeah, I would. Now, as the number of worlds increases, the likelihood that you're going to pursue it does go down. But generally speaking, people are more hesitant to create worlds than they should be. That said, you're going to create worlds when you realize, I shouldn't have, and you're going to learn. What you're really learning is you're learning the ability to anticipate what's likely to happen because of that initial inference. You're getting better at seeing the consequences of putting a variable into a certain slot without drawing it. And the better you get at that, the better you're going to get at, knowing when worlds is going to be valuable and when it's not. And even after you've done this for a super long time, sometimes you create worlds, and as you create them, you're like, okay, great. And then they don't really go anywhere, and then you just abandon them. But that's because you're going to get faster at just not hesitating, I coach my son's baseball team, and a lot of times the runner will try to steal from first to second. Okay. You guys imagine that scenario. So the pitcher throws the pitch, it goes to the catcher. And as soon as the runner is trying to run to second, sometimes the catcher will jump up and then try to decide whether or not to throw the ball to second and get that runner out at second. Okay, cool. You guys cool with this so far? A lot of times it doesn't happen though, because the catcher jumps up and then hesitates. The catcher's like, should I do it or not do it? And then by the time they throw it, it's too late. The runner's already going to make it, and it's no use. And so a lot of times I'm yelling like, don't hesitate, just go. Like if you're feeling like you can make it, just immediately make that decision and go. The same thing, you're like, what the heck? Is this baseball or is this games? But the same thing can happen with worlds. When you see an opportunity, you're like, wait a sec, here's a block. It can only go in 4 slots. Don't get over analytical about it. Just do it. Just create it. Because it's not going to create that long to create these worlds. And if they turn out to be ineffective, you will learn that faster having tried to create them than thinking about it too much, right? And you're going to get faster and faster at creating these. Okay, so anyways.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yep. What I would do here is I would have these 2 lines. That's not going to take super long. Then I'm going to do J, 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 J. Those are my only 4 options for J. That, of course, means that G has to go here, G here, G here, and G here. Are you guys cool with that so far? Okay. All right. What do we know now? Well, in this top world, right? So I haven't totally gotten rid of this rule, but this is still a big rule. MGM, I've got to fit that in here into these 4 slots. Sound good? but I don't know which slots they go into. So I'm just gonna write M, G, M. Notice they're floating above there. There's a lot of possibilities. Another J could come in there as long as it came in before G. Another T could come in there, really anywhere, stuff like that. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, now let's go to the second world here. Oh boy, there's a couple options. If M goes here, then it's going to be MGM. But if M comes here, I have a lot of options right there. Same thing down here. And this right here, this is going to be MGM. Okay. I could split these two worlds on the basis of wherever that first M goes. That would actually be helpful. So I'm focusing in on this first M. That first M could come here, or it could come here. Are you guys okay with that? So this is me trying to squeeze this stuff into two things. But what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm just going to go like this. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Trying to save space here. And basically I have this GJT, okay? GJT. Now it could be GJT. Either the first M is here or the first M is here. So if the first M goes here, fine. If the first M goes here, then it's GM, MGM, T. This world is almost done. I know J can't go here. I know G can't go here. So an M is done. So it's got to be T. You guys cool with that? Yell at me if it doesn't make sense. This world is still a little fluid. It's got an M somewhere, but I don't really know where that goes. I have the same thing down here. So I'm just going to split this up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have GJ, T, GJ, T. I'm essentially taking this world right here and I'm splitting it into two worlds. Again, either the last M can go here or the last M can go here and fill up these spots. Those are the only two places that the last M can go. So if I do M here and M here, this one is easier to fill out because it becomes, oh wait, actually, oh yeah, no, this is exactly right. MGM, right? In this case, I have to put an M over here somewhere, but I don't know where. So I'm just going to put M floating over here. These worlds are okay. They're a little unsatisfying because this thing has some flexibility. This has flexibility. This is starting to fill in, but what could this be? This can't be T. It can't be J. Could it be G? Could G go here? I think it could. And M can't go there. Oh, actually, so that's the only thing that's left. So this is going to be G. Well, these worlds are decently full. I don't love all the flexibility here, but I'm just going to fill them out as quickly as I can and then jump into the questions. Okay. Questions about these worlds. I know it can get a little confusing when you start subdividing worlds themselves, and that's what I did with these two middle ones. But yeah. That's my worlds. And you can actually fill these out pretty quick. Jermaine.
Yeah, so the third worlds that has G in the fourth spot, I was kind of experimenting with it and just seeing it. Is that world M could go, where could the M go? Like where could all the M's go in that situation?
Well, so it's easier if you focus in on one of the M's. So what I focused in on was the second M, right? And if the second M could come here, right? I could have MGM. That's the earliest that the second M could come. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, and then the only other option for the second M is to come over here. So that's how I ended up splitting that into two worlds, because M2, the second M, can only go in two places.
And if you had MGM and then that M being the third spot, so M in the first and M in the third, then for the sixth option, you would have to have G.
Yes.
Correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So basically this world, it turned into these two worlds, right?
Oh,
And this world turned into these two. Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Jad.
These signs just answered my question. I was just wondering which worlds were divided.
Yes, I'm so sorry. The reality is, when you're doing this on a piece of paper, I probably would have just created 4 slots, and I should have just done that here. I don't know what I'm thinking here. I was trying to be conservative with my space because of the whiteboard, but if I created 4 like rows, right, just keep going down, then these could have nicely just fit in there, and then I just have a bunch of stuff right underneath each other, and I wouldn't have had to reproduce this one. I could have just split it into 2 by itself. Anyways, small thing, but paper can sometimes be a little bit better than a whiteboard. All right, so let's jump into the questions. I'm going to start with question 11. This one, let's see, is it our traditional question? Yes. Which one of the following is an acceptable schedule of destinations for freedom in order from 1 to 7? Okay, this is a process of elimination question, or you can answer it however you want, but I tend to find that to be a little bit easier. So the first rule said J can't be 4th. I'm just going to scan down these answers and eliminate any in which J is 4th, right? Because this question is asking us for 5. It's giving us 5 scenarios and asking us which one would work. So if anyone violates this first rule, then it's not going to work, okay? So is J ever 4th? It looks like it is in D. If you can beat me to it, you're always welcome to do so. But it looks like D has J in 4, which is not good, right? So D is out. Sound good? Okay, the next rule says T is in 7. Okay, is T ever not in 7? If T is ever not in 7, yeah, that's E. Okay. Okay, so far that's 2 points for me. If you guys can beat me to it, go for it. The next rule is the MGM rule, right? MGM is okay in A. MGM is not okay in B, right?
Are you asking for the answer?
I'm asking which answer choice is actually eliminated by the rule. So if the rule is MGM, sorry, it's not a fair fight. I didn't even tell you guys what the goal was, but I'm eliminating answer choices as I read these rules, right? So MGM not happening in B. So B is out as well. So far we've eliminated B, D, and E. Okay, the next rule is that G rule. If you have J, then you have to have G before it. That's okay in A. Ooh, that's not good in C, right? Thank you, Tanya. You beat me to that one. So point for you, but C is out. That means the answer has to be A. We didn't even get through all the rules, but that's okay. If we want to double check the last rule, you can't have consecutive weeks, and we don't have consecutive weeks. So A is the answer. Questions about that question? Okay, let's keep going. So the next question is...
Sorry, was the answer C for this one?
For question
number 11? Yeah.
For 11, it was actually A. So we eliminated everything except A. You can also click on the I, and it will show you what the correct answer is.
All right, sorry about it. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. So question 12 is not an if question. It doesn't start with if, yada, yada. So I'm actually going to skip this question. Question 11 didn't start with if either, but because it was our traditional first question, I just went ahead and answered it to make sure I understand the rules correctly. But question 12, I'm going to skip. Okay, so I'm going to have to come back to it later, but it's not too hard to come back because you can see in the nav that it hasn't been, no answer has been given. Okay. Okay, so question 13. This is an if question, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. If freedom makes a voyage to T in week 5, which one of the following could be true? Okay, T in week 5 doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen here. It only happens in this one and this one. So in these top 2 worlds, T is in 5. Are you guys cool with that? So if T is in 5 in these top 2 worlds, what could be true? Okay, so I'm just going to look at the top two worlds because those are the only worlds in which T could be 5. Let's take a look. So just to avoid confusing everyone, I'm going to cross this world out and this world out because these worlds were transformed into these two worlds right here. Okay, boy, that's a mess. I hope you guys can forgive me. Okay, so anyways, T in 5, that can only happen here, and that can happen here. Which of one could be true? Could T be in week 1? No, doesn't happen in either world. M in week 2? No, no. Okay. G in week 3? No. No, because M is going to have to come into week 3 if T is in week 5. You guys see that? If T is in week 5, in this world, M is going to have to come into 3. You guys cool with that? Okay. Eric, I just noticed you have a Giants hat on. Is that true? I didn't know you were from the Giants.
Yes, but trivia question for you: which Giants?
Oh, now it's looking all funky. I can't tell.
It's the San Jose Giants, the San Francisco Giants single A team.
Oh, got it. Okay, deep. All right, thank you.
650 area code.
Okay, neat. Anyways, G is in week 3. No, that's not going to happen. D. M is in week 4. Could M be in week 4? Well, in this diagram, I have to put an M somewhere, and T, if T is in 5, then M could certainly come into week 4. That's looking like that could be true. Just to double check, E says Jamaica in week 6. No, not if T is in 5. If T is in 5, then I can't put Jamaica in 6 because G would have to go in 5. Sound good? So the answer is D after all. Okay, that's our if question. Question 14. If Frida makes a voyage to G in week 1 and to Jamaica in week 5. Okay, G in week 1, that happens here and that happens here. Ooh, this one already has G in week 1. Boy, okay. And J in week 5. Oh, J is in week 5 right here. And J could be in week 5 here. We could have J, G. Wow, so both of these worlds are still in play, and G is in 1. Okay, which one of the following must be true? Oh, well, what is true about both of these worlds when J is in 5? Of course, T is last, but that's always the case. I'm seeing something right here. M has to be in week 6 in both of them if J is in week 5. M could be in 2 or 3. M could be in 3. So there's some flexibility there. But at least between these two diagrams, M has to go into 6. Do you guys see that? If it's asking you what must be true, then it's going to have to be true in both worlds that are applicable. I'm going to look for M in week 5 or 6. We do have that answer. It's E. So we could check the rest, but I suspect the answer is E. Really quick, A says J is in 2. Doesn't have to be true. We could have M in week 2. T in week 2, again, doesn't have to be true. We could have M in week 2. M in week 3 could be true, doesn't have to be true. It is true up here, but not necessarily true here. And then G in week 6, well, actually, we just saw M is in week 6, so that's out. Okay, questions on this question? I know this is going to be a little challenging. Jermaine.
For the last world, the one where GJT is in succession,
yep.
Could you do G, MGM, and then GJT or no?
Oh, yeah, you could actually. So I skipped that world. You could have G, MGM, GJT. Yep, you absolutely could.
Okay.
Wait. No, wait, hold on. Sorry, one sec. What's the thing say? It said G is in week 1. Yes, so that's possible, but what I'm forgetting is J has to be in week 5. So that's why, sorry, that's why I didn't look at this world, because we need to be able to put J into week 5. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
oh, okay. I glossed over that too. My bad.
Okay, cool. Okay, question 15 is also an if question. So it says, if Frida makes a voyage to G in week 1 and to T in week 2. G in week 1, no, yes, but then what else? T in week 2, no. So the only option here is this world right here. This is the only world in which I can put G in 1 and T in 2. If I put G in 1 and I put T in 2, do you guys see what has to happen in this world without drawing anything? G1, T2.
M has to be in 3.
M has to be in 3. That's absolutely right. Okay, so it's going to be GTM right here, GTM, okay? Which of the following must be true? M is in week 3. Yep, actually, that's what you just said. That's got to be the answer, but let's look at the others really quick. Does M have to be in 4? No. Does M have to be in 5? No. Does G have to be in 3? No, M is. Does G have to be in 5? No, J is. So that's the answer. The answer is A. Okay. Yell at me if it doesn't make sense. Let's keep going. 16. If Frida makes a voyage to M in week 3. Okay, no. Oh, here's M in 3. Here's M in 3. Here's M in 3. Here's lots of worlds where M is 3. Or could be 3. Which of the following could be an accurate list of Freedom's destinations in 4 and 5? Oh, okay. Well, what I'm gonna do, okay, if M is in 3, I do know that G and J could be in 4 and 5, so that's a possibility. You guys see that? If M is in 3, who could be in 4 and 5? G and J, T and G maybe. Yeah, some comment. So at least J, G, J, and then maybe T, G, or again, G, J. Okay, so let's see here. Could GT work? Yeah, it could work here. If I put M here, I could do G, T, M. Sound good? Let's just double check that though, because I'm a little uncertain. How about B? Could we have JG? Well, we can't have JG because if M is in 3, then J going here would force G to go here, right? So that's not going to work. M can't go next to M, so C is out. D, I don't have T here. Could I do M, TJ? No, you can't do TJ because J would require G before it. TM, oh, that's a problem because if I do MTM, then I'm going to violate the MGM rule. Sound good? So those other ones are wrong. If you're feeling confident about A, though, you could just pick it. I mean, here is literally an example where M is 3rd and we have GJ. Okay. Or sorry, oh, not GJ. I'd have to go up here. So M and then GT. But that would work in that world. Okay, so the answer is A. Question 17. Which one? Oh, this is our which question. That's fine because there's no more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and do question 17, and then I'm going to go back and do question 12. That's the one we skipped. Which one following must be true about Freedom's schedule of voyages? Okay, if it must be true, then it's got to be true for all of my diagrams. Sound good? So Freedom makes a voyage to G either in week 1 or 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Here though, could I avoid it? Could I have M, T? Ooh, I don't know if I could actually. I might have to have a G in there. Anyways, G does go here. G, yeah, it does. It seems like it has to go in 1 or 2. Okay, so maybe that's the answer. I'm not super confident though, because I haven't proven it here or here. Can I come up with a counterexample? Oh, wait. I could do M, G, M, and then T. If I do T, M, G, M, then I don't have to have G in one or two. I just need one counterexample, and then that answer is wrong. Okay, it doesn't have to be true. Okay, answer choice B. M is in either 2 or 3. No, not here. Okay, that's my one counterexample, so that's out. C. Freedom makes at most 2 voyages to G. Could we have more than one G? It seems like we could. We could do G, M, G, M, G, right? So that's 3 Gs. So that's out. D, freedom makes at most 2 voyages to J. Now that kind of makes sense. We could try to prove that. But if you have 2 Js, then you're going to have 2 Gs, which seems doable. But what about 3 Js? Could you make more than 2 voyages to J? If you go to J 3 times, that means you got to go to G 3 times. That's 6. And then I need a T, and I still need my 2 M's. There's just not enough slots. You guys cool with that? So that's not going to work because you'd have too many variables. Okay, so D is the answer. E, really quick. Freedom makes at most 2 voyages to T. Could I fit in more T's? Maybe T, M, T. Yeah, TMT, and then I have a 3rd T at the end. Okay, anyways, the answer is D for question 17. Let's go back to question 12. That's the one I skipped because it started with which. Which one of the following cannot be true about freedom's schedule of voyages? Okay, if it can't be true, then that means it can never happen. So if I see it happening once, it's wrong, right? Freedom makes a voyage to Trinidad in week 6. Well, that's actually, that's something we already figured out. We figured out that T can't go in 6 because T is in 7. So that cannot be true. That's the answer. I'm pretty dang confident about that one. So I'm just not even going to check the rest. Does anyone have any questions about B, C, D, or E? Okay, questions about this game? Anything? Questions about games in general?
Where can I find, do you have additional videos of how to create the worlds?
I think there's a class on worlds. Maybe Abigail is one of those free, maybe.
Yeah, I posted some links in the chat, but they may have gotten buried, so I'll post them again.
Okay, cool. Divya.
Thank you.
Okay, I feel like for this question, like I created one world and then I felt like it was taking longer than it was going to. So I just went to the questions and like for each question, I created a world based off of like the rule. And I felt like that helped me. So do you necessarily like for some games, would it be okay to like maybe not create the worlds at the beginning and do it based off of the rules that they give you in each question? And then for some of them, like you do it all at the beginning.
Absolutely. So you don't have to do worlds. You don't have to. And in fact, I think there's another video of me doing this game and probably Nathan doing this game without worlds. So try them both out and see what works for you. That said, it's a good practice to try to do this game without worlds and then try to do it again with worlds. Just create game flexibility, right? You're like, yeah, I can do a layup with my left hand and I can do a layup with my right hand, no problem. So whatever scenario you're kind of thrown at, you get comfortable and see how they work. This, I wish I would have done these over here because it wouldn't have been as messy. And I think if they were all in a row, it'd be easier to just look down and be like, okay, can this go in slot 5? So unfortunately, this wasn't the best representation of worlds, but it's still a good skill to practice both and see how they work, you know, because it is a totally different mindset. And in that case, were you doing the if questions first?
Yeah, I actually went in order, which maybe I should have done the if questions first, but I just like went in order.
In this game, it wasn't that big a deal because there was only one question that we did out of order, question 12, right? But in some games, like half of the questions are if, half the questions aren't. And if you do the if ones first, then you're creating that example diagram that you can use to eliminate answers in other questions. Like if they ask you what must be true and one of your sample diagrams doesn't have that, then you're like, well, no, I mean, it didn't have to be true in question 13, so I can get rid of answers. It doesn't necessarily give you the answer, but at least you can use it to eliminate.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Cool. Any other questions on this game or games in general? Okay. All right. Thank you guys for bearing with me. Yasmin, go for it.
Hi, sorry. I was wondering if you could go over question 17 again, or maybe I could wait till the end of class.
Yeah, you know what? Just to save time, let's do it. Let's go back to it at the end of class. Sound good?
Okay, no problem.
Cool.
Thank
Nathan.
you.
Yeah. Don't let me forget, by the way.
Yeah, hey Ben, I was just I was wondering if we could by chance go over, I know that it's not really on the itinerary for today, but if we could go over a game that involves the circle slash method that was used to describe grouping games a little bit. I've been having some trouble with that.
Yeah.
If that could wait like until the end too, or if we want to go through one now, that'd be great. But if at some point we could, that'd be much appreciated.
Cool. Well, Abigail, do we have a whole class on that? Because that would probably be the best thing. It's free.
We do have a boot camp, but it's only for premium and live. It's in the lessons, but I'll
okay. Nathan, are you free? You're free tier?
No, so I did go over it. Like I'm familiar with the one that she's talking about. And
okay.
Yeah, like I've done that boot camp, but I just kind of wanted to go over one more. If we don't have time, that's okay. I'm just wondering if we could
sure.
Okay,
Okay.
like one example, like one game.
Yeah. We probably won't have time, but we can talk afterward. So cool. Martha.
I have a question for the live classes. For live classes, do you always post what you guys are gonna go over? Like today for the syllabus?
Yes, you can look at the syllabus before you attend the class. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Cool. All righty. Thank you, everyone. Let's talk about logical reasoning for a half second here, and then I'll go ahead and give you time to go ahead and do those 3 questions. I'll leave that up for now. But the most important thing with the demon approach is, which we think is the best approach, is coming to a real understanding of what's being told you on the page, right? And that's true in games, it's true in reading comprehension, and it's true in logical reasoning. Someone just emailed me yesterday and I responded and I said, they were wondering about the test changing, this new game format that some people, the test was experimenting with. I don't know if you guys have seen any of this stuff, but don't stress about it too much. What I said to her, and I want to say to you, is that the strategy remains the same. You read, you try to understand, you then predict an answer, and then you go ahead and read the answers, right? So it's always going to come back to, do you understand what each sentence is saying? And what do you think of that sentence? Can you make sense of it? And if you can understand it intuitively, then you're good to go. The vast majority of questions will be easier for you. In most cases, we aren't explaining logic to people. We do explain logic sometimes. Obviously, this is a logical test, but most people understand the logic. What they misunderstood was some sentence. And once they understand it, then the question makes sense, right? So what you want to try to do is get ahead of us explaining the sentences to you and try your best to understand them yourself. So when you do the next 3 logical reasoning questions, read each sentence and just try to understand it on a real level, right? You don't need to overthink it. You just need to say, okay, what is this literally saying? Okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Pause until it makes sense, and then move on to the next sentence. And when you're done with reading the argument, decide whether that argument was a good argument or a bad argument. Usually there is someone trying to make an argument to you or to somebody else. And your job is to decide whether you think that argument is good or bad. Does the evidence prove the conclusion? If it doesn't, then it's a bad argument, right? And then read the question, figure out what they're asking, and try to predict an answer as best you can, and then start looking at the answer choices. Let's go ahead and do these 3 questions, and then I'll try to show you what I'm talking about when it comes to reading carefully, predicting an answer, and then choosing an answer. Alrighty, good luck. Okay. First of all, can you guys hear me? I changed my mic, so I don't know if it's okay. Good, still working. Great. Looks like most of you have filled out the poll. Thank you very much. Based on what you've said, it looks like the morally right question was the most challenging one. That's the one at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and tackle that one first. Then I'll do Tasmanian, and then I'll do ethicist. Oh, let's see here. Yeah, okay, we'll do it in that order. Let's start with morally right. Test J, section 2, question 23. So this question says philosopher, right? So a philosopher is talking to us. This philosopher says an action is morally right if it would be reasonably expected to increase the aggregate well-being of the people affected by it. Okay, so this sentence right here is telling me a situation in which something would definitely be morally right, right? Now, there's a key word here that sticks out to me, and that is, aside from just if, the if is telling me the situation in which something is morally right. Oh, shoot, one sec. My desk is going crazy. Okay. It's telling me the situation in which something is morally right. But the phrase that's sticking out to me is reasonably expected. The reason that that sticks out to me is maybe just because of the LSAT, but this isn't talking about a situation in which the aggregate well-being actually increases. You guys see that? Like, I don't care if it goes down, stays the same, or gets better. Even if it gets better, if it is not something that is reasonably expected to get better, then I don't know whether something is morally right or not. This is only about reasonable expectations. So if something is reasonably expected to make life better for those involved, but turns out not doing so, it's still morally right. Sound good? So this is really about state of mind. Okay, next sentence. An action is morally wrong if, and only if, it would be reasonably expected to reduce the aggregate well-being of people affected by it. Well, this is a stronger claim than the first one because of the phrase if and only if. So if these certain circumstances are met, then, you know, if it's reasonably expected to make people less well off, the people involved less well off, then it's morally wrong. And that's the only time that something is morally wrong. That's what the only if is saying, right? So this sentence is saying a lot more than the first. The first one was telling me, hey, here's a situation in which something is morally right, but there could be other situations that make things morally right. This next sentence is saying, hey, here's a situation that makes things morally wrong. And by the way, it's also the only situation that makes things morally wrong. So nothing else can make something morally wrong. As long as it's reasonably expected to reduce aggregate well-being, then it is morally wrong. Nothing else matters. Okay. Well, conclusion. Thus, actions that would be reasonably expected to leave unchanged the aggregate well-being of the people affected by them are also right. Okay, this conclusion is really based on the second sentence. The first sentence almost seems like a distraction. It's the second sentence that has all the power. The second sentence is telling us these are the only circumstances in which things are morally wrong. So if you fall outside of those circumstances, does that make them morally right? Selma, you're shaking your head. You're saying no? Why not?
Not necessarily. I think we don't know enough to say that it would be morally right. I think we could probably say that it's not going to be morally wrong, but we can't say that it's right.
That's exactly right. So if we fall outside of these circumstances, right, and the circumstances are when it's reasonably expected to reduce the aggregate well-being of the people affected by the situation, when you fall outside of those situations, we know that they are not morally wrong, because these are the only circumstances under which things are morally wrong. But this conclusion went a little too far. It was like, hey, we're talking about a situation that falls outside of the morally wrong situation. Therefore, drum roll, it's morally right. And it's like, yeah, okay, hold up. We know it's not morally wrong, but does that make it morally right? No, it could be this neutral ground where we don't know the morality of anything. It's just not wrong. Unless there are only two options in the world. If there are only two options in the world, morally right or morally wrong, then yeah, it would be morally right. But we don't know that. The question says the philosopher's conclusion follows logically, in other words, must be true, if which one of the following is assumed. Okay, so this is a sufficient assumption question. That means it's asking me for an assumption. It's asking me for an answer choice that if it were added to the argument would make the conclusion follow logically. It would make the conclusion true. We just talked about how, hey, we do know that this situation is not morally wrong. We just don't know that it's morally right. So an answer choice that says something like, hey, there are only two possibilities in the universe. Actions are either morally right or they're morally wrong. Then the conclusion would follow logically. Okay. That's my prediction. Let's take a look at these answers. A, only wrong actions would be reasonably expected to reduce the aggregate well-being of the people affected by them. I think that is, maybe I'm, I don't know, wrong, maybe morally. This is a little weird because I'd like it to say morally wrong. But in any case, this is something that, if it is true, is supported by the second sentence of the passage. But it's not something that, if it were true, would make these actions that fall outside of this situation right. We still have the same problem. Just because you're not wrong doesn't mean you're right. Okay, B, no action is both right and wrong. Oh, that's kind of the opposite of what I was looking for. I was looking for an action is either right or wrong. So that's not right. Anyway, C, any action that is not morally wrong is morally right. Okay, Selma, that's what you said. That's the problem. And if that were added to the argument, the conclusion would now make sense. It would follow logically. So that's the answer. Let's see why D and E are wrong really quick. There are actions that would be reasonably expected to leave unchanged the aggregate well-being of the people affected by them. Okay, all that D does is say, hey, by the way, these kinds of actions exists on occasion. If anyone was tempted by this answer, you're probably thinking about this question like a necessary assumption question as opposed to a sufficient assumption question. You're probably asking yourself, oh, does this have to be true? Do these kinds of things have to exist? And that's not what it's asking. It's asking what, if it did exist, would make the conclusion true. Okay. Anyways, E, only right actions have good consequences. We actually don't care about the consequences at all in this argument. You guys are aware of that, right? This was all about states of mind, how things can be expected, not whether they actually are. So that's out. The answer is C. Questions on this question, Jermaine?
Could you please go over A one more time? Like I like C a lot better than A, but I can't pinpoint exactly. I know why C is right, but A just kind of still throws me off a little bit when I check it.
Sure. Jermaine, what is the problem with this argument in a nutshell?
Well, I believe it's saying, okay, so it's saying morally right is reasonably expected. And it's saying it's morally wrong only if and only if it's reasonably expected to reduce well-being. So
Yep.
then they're assuming that, or they're automatically concluding that it'll be reasonably, if it's not morally wrong, I guess they're reasonably that it's morally right, essentially, is what they're saying. I don't know how to explain it in the words, but
No, you're doing it. So that's what they did in this argument. The conclusion did talk about a scenario that fell outside of things that are morally wrong. So we know that if the aggregate well-being remains unchanged, then the action is not morally wrong. But that's where the argument's conclusion made a big jump. Instead of saying, hey, when things are unchanged, the action must not have been morally wrong, it jumped to the conclusion to say that it is in fact morally right. And so the problem with answer choice A is it still doesn't get us to what is right. It just continues to talk about what is wrong or what is not wrong. I mean, you could infer what's not wrong from A. You could say, well, if only wrong actions do this, then everything else must not be wrong. But that still doesn't show that it's right. That's the big problem here.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, very cool. Any other questions on this one? Okay. Let's go ahead and go to Tasmanian. Test J, Section 3, Question 9, Naturalist. The recent claims that the Tasmanian tiger is not extinct are false. Okay, so some people are saying that the Tasmanian tiger is still around, it's not extinct. But this naturalist is saying that those claims are false, so the naturalist must actually think that the Tasmanian tiger is extinct. I think it's helpful to take a half second and make sure you're understanding what's saying. Otherwise, you're going to have a double negative and maybe get twisted around. But the point is, the naturalist thinks the tiger is extinct. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay, why? That's probably the conclusion. Why is it extinct? The Tasmanian tiger's natural habitat was taken over by sheep farming decades ago. Okay, resulting in the animal's systematic elimination from the area. Okay, if you systematically eliminate an animal from an area, does that mean that the animal is now extinct? Well, yes, if that's the only place that the animal exists, although if the animal is in one zoo anywhere, it's not extinct. Okay, cool. So I like this evidence, but I'd like it to go further. From the world would have been great. Well, even then you'd have to say, but did someone put a Tasmanian tiger in a Falcon 9 rocket and shoot into space? Because then, you know, it might not be in the world, but still existing. So anyways, universe, that could work. Metaverse. Anyways, since the naturalists working in the region have discovered no hard evidence of its survival, well, the Tasmanian tiger is probably smart enough to avoid these naturalists, but whatever. Such as carcasses or tracks, I mean, maybe they're really savvy. I don't know. That's not the greatest evidence. I don't care that people haven't discovered it. It could still exist. In spite of alleged sightings of the animal, the Tasmanian tiger no longer exists. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So some people have supposedly seen it, and this person is not addressing that. Instead, they're just dismissing it. They're just like, oh, but let me repeat my conclusion. The Tasmanian tiger is extinct. This argument sucks. The tiger might be somewhere else. I don't know. It sounds like it's a goner, but it could still exist. And that's the standard. When someone asserts a conclusion, they have to prove that conclusion. They can't just provide some even good evidence. They've got to provide proving evidence, right? And they haven't proven their conclusion here. So that's my issue with this argument, right? Jeez Louise. Keep touching my desk controls. Okay, anyways, question 9 says, which one of the following is an assumption on which the naturalist argument depends? Okay, so the last question we did was a sufficient assumption question. This, on the other hand, is a necessary assumption question. So it's a very different question. Instead of asking what assumption, if true, proves the conclusion, I'm now just going to ask what assumption is required. Without it, the argument is not going to work. What is an assumption that the author has to agree with? It may not be enough to prove the conclusion, but it's something that the naturalist has to agree with. One thought here is that the naturalist has to agree that the Tasmanian tiger is nowhere else in the universe. Okay. A, sheep farming drove the last Tasmanian tigers to starvation by chasing them from their natural habitat. The naturalist does not have to agree with this because maybe they died from some other means, not necessarily starvation. So no, this is not something that the naturalist has to agree with. The naturalist could disagree and still think that the tigers are extinct. B, some scavengers in Tasmania are capable of destroying tiger carcasses without a trace. That is definitely not something that the naturalist has to agree with. This would undercut the naturalist argument. It would suggest, hey, maybe they do exist, but we just can't find them because the scavengers are very clean. They watch CSI or something like that. Anyways, answer choice C, every naturalist working in the Tasmanian tiger's natural habitat has looked systematically for evidence of the tiger's survival. No, the naturalist does not have to agree or believe that every single naturalist has been looking systematically. Maybe there was one lazy Joe Schmo who did nothing. That still doesn't, the naturalist doesn't depend on every single one of them doing their job perfectly. So that's out. D, the Tasmanian tiger did not move and adapt to a different region in response to the loss of habitat. Yes, the naturalist has to agree with this claim. If the naturalist does not believe this, then the naturalist would actually believe that the Tasmanian tiger did move and adapt to a different region. And that would totally undercut his or her argument. So the argument has to assume this. The naturalist has to agree with D. So that's the answer. E, those who have reported sightings of the Tasmanian tiger are not experienced naturalists. The naturalist might believe that, but the naturalist doesn't have to believe that. The naturalist could say, yeah, they're experienced. They just don't know what they're talking about. They got confused. It was too far off in the distance. The tiger doesn't exist. So E is probably tempting, but doesn't have to be true. Questions? Camilla.
So is this the one that's the same as a necessary or sufficient, you said?
This is a necessary assumption question, and the way we know that is from the word depends. It's looking for an assumption that the argument depends on or needs.
Is this similar to questions that say like something that like is taken for granted or something like that?
Yes, yes. When you see that in answer choices, takes for granted or presumes without providing justification means necessarily assumes. Okay, good. Any other questions on this question? Alrighty. Oh, wow. I see that we went over. So of the people, thanks for coming to class. I'm happy to go over this question 7. And I'll go ahead and stay and do that. Before I do that, Ginny, you have a question?
Yes. So I posted on the chat, but I was wondering if there's like a strategy to detect wrong answers of like sufficient versus necessary assumption questions, and what would the differences be, like the nuances?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to remember here is that in a necessary assumption question, just ask yourself, does this answer have to be true? And if it has to be true for the conclusion to make any sense, then that's the correct answer. In a sufficient assumption question, you're not asking what has to be true. You're actually asking the opposite. You're saying which answer, if it were true, would make the conclusion true.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Gene, you had a question?
No, you answered it. I mean, was you somewhat did. I was just wondering what the difference between must be true questions and necessary assumption questions are, but I guess like you explained the nuance of it.
Well, that's the difference between a necessary assumption question and a sufficient assumption question. There isn't a fundamental difference between, there isn't a huge difference between a necessary assumption question and a must be true question. If in both cases you just ask yourself, does this have to be true? You're going to be guiding yourself to the correct answer 95% of the time.
Okay.
Yeah. The one nuance here is that in a necessary assumption question, you're really asking yourself, if the conclusion were true, what else has to be true? Whereas in just a must be true question, you don't care about the argument. In fact, there's often not an argument. All you care about is which one of these answers has to be true given any one of the claims in the passage, not just the conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep. Ginny.
Sorry, I have a follow-up.
Yep.
So in, I think the morally right, wrong question, I think at one point you said something like, if you got this wrong, I think you might have thought that it was a sufficient assumption question.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
like, how are you able to like tell from like just looking
Well,
in the answer?
I mean, maybe I shouldn't have made that comment. I was just wondering if people were tempted by that answer, why they might have been. It sounded like something that must be true in that question, but that's not really what we're asking in a sufficient assumption question. We're not asking, hey, which answer must be true? We're asking which answer, if it were true, would prove the conclusion. So D it didn't do a good job, even if it were something that must be true.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Piggybacking off of that real quick. So then if for some of us who chose A instead of D in the Tasmanian question, could it be that we switched the necessary and the sufficient?
Possibly, but my guess is, I mean, it depends on what your reasoning was for picking A, but I would say the problem with A is that it's too specific. The naturalist doesn't have to agree that they died by starvation. That's overly specific. It's certainly possible. Yeah, maybe you were thinking about it like, if this were true, that would certainly help, right? Yeah, if sheep farming drove the last, that's kind of key, the last Tasmanian tigers to starvation, then yes, they would be extinct. So if this were true, then I think that would strongly support and possibly prove the conclusion that the tigers are extinct now. I think the key word there is last. If those are the last ones and they were driven to starvation, then there's no more. So yeah, that could be a sufficient assumption. Cool. If you guys have any feedback for the class, hit the feedback thing on the syllabus page. Tell me what you liked, what you hated, and anything in between. I guess I'll go ahead and do question 7 because it was on the syllabus. Anyone want to go over that question still? Happy to do it? Okay, we will do it. Let me just do that and then we'll go for there. I'm sorry, the class is going over. Thanks for hanging out. Cool. So test J, section 2, question 7. Ethicist. The most advanced kind of moral motivation is based solely on abstract principles. That itself is a little abstract. Moral motivation, in other words, what motivates you to do something morally, it's based only on abstract principles, solely on abstract principles. So it can't be based on anything else. I don't know what your other options are, honestly, but this form of motivation is in contrast with calculated self-interest or the desire to adhere to social norms and conventions. Okay, I'm still a little bit unclear about this form of motivation, but the point is that it's based on principles and it's not, I don't know, in contrast with. So it's not calculated self-interest and it's not a desire to conform.
Sound good? I mean, that's all I know. I don't know a whole lot, but I know two things it's not, and one characteristic of what it is. Okay, this doesn't seem like an argument. It just is two random facts. The question says the actions of which one of the following individuals exhibit the most advanced kind of moral motivation. Oh, okay. So I'm looking for something that fits with this description. So it is based on abstract principles and not self-interested or not someone trying to conform to convention, right? A, Bobby contributed money to a local charity during a charity drive at work because he worried that not doing so would make him look stingy. Okay, that sounds like someone who's trying to adhere to social norms and conventions, right? Maybe even calculated self-interest, doesn't want to look bad. So that's wrong because that's not this advanced kind of moral motivation. B, Wes contributed money to a local charity during a charity drive at work because he believed that doing so would improve his employer's opinion of him. Again, that seems like calculated self-interest. So not good. C, Donna's employers engaged in an illegal but profitable practice that caused serious damage to the environment. Donna's employers, very not good. Okay, Donna did not report this practice to the authorities out of fear that her employers would retaliate against her. Okay, sounds like calculated self-interest, right? She's not reporting because of some high abstract principle. She's doing it because she's afraid for her own good. So C is wrong. D, Jadine's employers engaged in illegal but profitable practice that caused serious damage to the environment. Okay, again, bad employer. Jadine reported this practice to the authorities out of a belief that protecting the environment is always more important than monetary profit. Okay, well that belief, okay, that was her belief that motivated her. That doesn't sound like calculated self-interest, unless saving the environment is in her self-interest. But it doesn't sound like self-interest. And it doesn't sound like a desire to adhere to social norms and conventions because she's doing something that's going to piss off her employer. I mean, unless she's an environmentalist and she's worried about what her environmentalist friends think of her, it sounds like it's more based on this belief rather than based on concerns of what other people think, even environmentalists. So that's probably the answer. Leah's employers engaged in illegal but profitable practice that caused serious damage to the environment. She reported this practice to the authorities only because several colleagues had been pressuring her to do so. Okay, that's clearly adhering to norms and conventions. So D is the answer. Questions on this one?
I think so I got this one wrong, but now that we're reading it out loud, I think that I got it wrong because of the form of motivation is in contrast with calculated self-interest, because when I was reading it, I was reading it as it said, the form of motivation is due to calculated self-interest or desire to adhere.
Oh, you skipped right over the in contrast?
Yeah, I think I missed that whole in contrast part.
Yeah.
Because even when you was going through the answers, I was like, wait, why? And then I went back to reading, I was like, oh, in contrast.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That one word.
Yeah. That's pretty common on the test. There's a word or phrase that maybe we miss. We can often miss the word not too, right? And then something that we thought was positive becomes negative. One thing I do want to point out here is that your mistake is super common. When most people struggle between two answer choices, they want to debate the differences between those two answer choices, which is fine and probably helpful. But oftentimes the problem originated long before. It originated in the passage itself. So don't forget to go back and make sure you understand that completely, because once you do, that may just completely solve the problem, and debating the answer choices won't help. I know that you did go back, and so that's perfect. That's a good example of what you want to do. Okay, cool. Any other questions on this one? All right. Thank you, everyone. I know, oh, wait. Someone had Yasmin, yes, you had a question, right, about the game or something like that?
Yes, number 17 on the logic game.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, shoot. I don't know what I was thinking. I erased my diagram.
It's okay. I still have mine.
Okay. So I don't know how helpful I'll be. Which one following must be true about freedom's schedule of voyages? Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm going through, I vaguely remember that I would look at the diagrams or the worlds and I would try to decide whether or not this answer choice could be violated. Because if I can violate the answer choice, then it doesn't have to be true.
Okay.
So maybe this will end up being an exercise for you. And then you can also look at the other videos there by skipping to this question, but go through each answer choice and see if you can come up with a counterexample. If you can, then that answer choice is wrong. And then you can move to the next one.
Okay. Yeah. With this one, I was able to eliminate 3 answer choices. And then I got to 2 and with the diagram, I just wasn't sure
Which
how to
one
get
did
to the
you?
actual.
Yeah,
So
which one?
I eliminated A, B, and C.
Oh,
And then I got to D and
okay.
E. And I see how freedom makes at most 2 voyages to Jamaica. I just wasn't sure how are you also eliminating freedom makes at most 2 voyages to Trinidad based on the way the diagrams were written. That's what I wasn't able to see.
Yeah, I mean, if you can see why D is correct, that's often enough, and you can just pick that and then move on.
I see.
But the key difference between D and E is that Trinidad doesn't require some other player to come into play, right? So we could have 3 T's, 2 M's, so now we're at 5, and then a J and a G, and we're at 7.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, and then someone else had a question about circle slash. I think the best way to do that, honestly, is to get a game, and maybe we should just put that on another syllabus or something. Abigail, we could try to do a circle slash class, maybe, if that's okay. Jermaine.
Yeah, so I know you need to get ready and wrap everything up, but I just have one last question on how is the best way to effectively attack some arguments. Like I've been personally having issues with weekend questions, especially. So when it gets to those like 3 level, 4 level questions, or even 5 level questions, I end up getting into some issues when it comes to like the weakeners and the strengtheners. And I read the descriptions and explanations, and I don't know, it just seems so effortless for you guys. I mean, obviously you're teaching it, but it's like, how do you do it better?
Well, one thing I would think about or practice getting good at is when you read a passage, deciding whether it's an argument or a set of facts. And if you decide that it's an argument because there is a conclusion and at least one piece of evidence, then just ask yourself, okay, if I accept this evidence as true, does that prove? Do I have to now, am I compelled to accept the conclusion? And if there's any reason that you're not compelled, you absolutely have to accept the conclusion as true based on that evidence, then that's a problem. And that will lead you to the gaps in the argument.
Okay, so just make sure I just keep an eye out for, I guess, conclusion indicators, whether it be the strength of the argument or however the phrasing is, and then just attack it based off of that, correct?
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about conclusion indicators. Conclusion indicators verify what you might have already suspected to be the conclusion, but they can also throw you off because sometimes they introduce an intermediate conclusion and now you think it's the main conclusion. So the most important thing is step back when you're done reading the argument. If you haven't already figured it out, ask yourself, okay, what is this author trying to prove? Oh, I think the author is trying to prove this idea right here. And you should be able to identify in the argument. It's like, oh, it's the second sentence right here. Okay, now that means the rest of this stuff could be evidence. It could be the opinion of others as well, but figure out which claims in there are the evidence and then say, okay, does this evidence prove that conclusion? Prove it. There's no other possible explanation here. If so, then it's a valid argument. But in 90% of these arguments, it's not. It's not enough evidence. And that's partly because it's almost impossible to prove anything without really
Yeah.
extreme statements.
Okay, of course. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the class. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming.
I was just gonna say that I also have trouble with weakening
Okay.
question.
Yep.
You and Nathan actually answered my question and my email on YouTube with the LSAT Demon Daily.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, like a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
So I find what happened to me is that like because often we and strengths and questions, they introduce new informations in the answer choices.
Yes.
And you have to be able to see how it relates to the argument in the stimulus. Well, first attack the stimulus first, attack the argument, and then see what the information, the new information does. My problem is that it happens to me a lot that I eliminate all 5 answer choices because I just go through each of them and be like, oh, this is irrelevant. This is irrelevant. How is this relevant? And I end up getting rid of all 5 answer choices. And then I'd be like, oh shit, one of them is actually relevant. And the right answer doesn't speak to me. Like I'm not able to sometimes realize how relevant that is to the stimulus.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 things I would do. One is continue to work on trying to identify what is wrong with the argument. So try to get better at that, because sometimes the relevance of an answer choice will become more obvious once you realize what the main problem is with the argument. The second thing I would do is, even when you don't, well, sometimes, especially in a strengthen or weaken question, we may identify a problem. There might be 2 problems. Maybe the correct answer is actually fixing the problem that we didn't identify, which is why working on identifying problems is such a good skill to have. But even if you don't spot it, when you're strengthening or weakening an argument and you're struggling to know what to focus on the conclusion. Because when you strengthen an argument, you're making the conclusion more likely to be true. So you can zero in on the conclusion and ask yourself, okay, does this answer make me feel better about the conclusion? Yes or no, right? And so maybe that will help you see the relevance. I mean, ultimately, what we're trying to do is figure out what the gap is between the evidence and the conclusion. And the correct answer is going to start to work on some of those gaps. There might be multiple gaps. There might be multiple jumps. But sometimes people are just focusing on too much. Just ask yourself, does this help or hurt the conclusion? That's where you can start.
Yeah. One great example is the birds, the weather, the climate is getting warmer, and then sorry, my cat is scratching my door. Sorry. Like the climate is getting warmer, so the birds stop migrating, and then also the bird feeder. Do you remember that question? Like a bird feeder.
I think I do. Then,
yeah. And then the right answer choice was when the bird feed on the bird feeder, the predators can't get them.
Yep.
And I initially didn't recognize how that was relevant, but then so I got that question wrong, and then when I viewed the explanation, it's like, oh, of course, like, yeah. So I'll keep practicing. Thank you.
Yeah. Good luck. You got this. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming on a Monday during work. Hope no one gets fired, of course. And have a good week, and I'll hopefully see some of you next week. So thanks.
See you. Bye.
Hang on, Ben, are we still like just? I know you guys touched on it quickly, just about the circle slash class. Do you guys plan on doing one, or should what's kind of the?
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. Are you premium or live or basic?
Yeah, I'm the second higher one.
Oh, you're premium.
Yeah,
okay.
And you've already watched the boot camp, circle slash boot camp in the lessons?
Yeah, I watched the boot camp, and I've tried going through some of the examples that were under it, right? Like the practice the circle slash with these games. and I can do it for a few, but I don't really understand for like majority of them how to use it. So I was just wondering if we could like just go through some examples at some point. I mean, obviously it doesn't have to be now.
I mean, one option is we do a free class on Circle Slash. Another option, Abigail, do you want to send Nathan a bunch of games that are Circle Slash?
Yeah, we have a list of them in that bootcamp lesson. Like Matt covered a few in his class, and then there's a list like of extra practice, so we can pull games from that list. But
do those not currently have video explanations using Circle Slash?
Oh no, they do.
Most
They
of
do.
them
It's
do.
just I'm still having a hard time like kind of wrapping my head around it, honestly. So that was kind of
Okay.
why.
Yeah, I
But,
mean, maybe I'm just trying to think about because you're not live, so it would have to be another free class. But I'm sure that Matt would be willing to do that or something. So
I'll also chip in and say, Nathan, Circle Slash is not the only way to do in-out games. You're perfectly entitled to do them your own way using an in column and an out column if that's just intuitively easier for some people. And I use both methods kind of depending on how I want to see the game. So I mean, Circle Slash I find really useful, and probably good to get right, but it doesn't have to be how you do the game.
Yeah, I know, and I've noticed that. Like I've just going through it, like just doing like kind of the traditional way works for me most of the time. But I mean, I do miss a few just because like I don't really go over the worlds in such depth, right? As a result of like not going into depth with all the worlds, I end up missing like a couple must be trues and stuff like that. So I mean, I would like to be able to wrap my head around the idea, but yeah, I guess I'll just keep drilling the questions that he has here with video explanations. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe just next class we can just go over an example.
yeah,
or something like that.
yeah. I think a free class would be good. So yeah, we'll try. Cool.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Nathan.
Bye.
All right. See you guys. Thanks again.
See you later.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Abigail. Thanks for your help.
Take care.